Most people who come to my channel are here because they've got an interest in nature and creativity. I'm kicking off this year by asking the two biggest questions that we can ask ourselves when we're in this particular niche. What is nature journaling and what is a nature journal? Now, these are two very different questions. One is a kind of an object or a thing, and the other is a process or an activity. I'm going to take you through some of my own nature journals and we'll have a little look at how mine fit into these definitions and a little bit about how nature journaling has developed and how other nature journalers are defining the activity. So let's get started. I'm sat here in front of my bookshelves today because I wanted to really think a little bit about published literature and what already exists in the field of nature journaling. Now, nature journaling isn't new. It's something that's been going on for centuries. It's just that it kind of fell under other names. So like the field arts, scientific illustration, naturalists' diaries, just general diaries. And for a long time, it wasn't really called anything in particular, so it was kind of spread across lots of different disciplines. What a nature journal is very much defined by what you bring to it. So for some of the earliest nature journalers, people such as Gilbert White, whose beautiful illustrated edition I have here. I should say that these illustrations are not by Gilbert White, but they've been added later on. But having a little look through here, we can see that he was very interested in keeping track of what was happening phenologically, which is to say what the plants were doing and when the leaves were changing colour, when the leaves were starting to come out, and how this varied from season to season, year to year. He was writing these things down very much also to do with what the crops were doing, which was very important for all people at this time in the 1700s when we were so reliant for food on what we could grow locally. Nature journaling really was a way of keeping track of how the seasons were turning and what was happening. And Gilbert White is one of the most celebrated naturalists because he was one of the first to really want to keep these kinds of records. Now, perhaps at the time and perhaps even now, people would not necessarily call these a nature journal. They would perhaps call them a naturalist's diary. But I personally think that this is very much part of the genre and perhaps the beginning of it. Then after this, in the Victorian period, we had naturalists such as Darwin and Audubon and Gould, who were particularly interested in capturing the differences between species, and they were doing this through drawing and journal writing. So I particularly like looking at Audubon's plates, and it's sort of interesting to see how our different techniques have developed. As in those days, they would generally kind of work from dead animals, dead birds, and they would sketch these birds that had typically been shot and then brought to them and try to learn the differences and understand the differences between these birds and animals by close scientific illustrated study. But it is not just the scientists who have an interest in capturing nature in this kind of way. Very often, particularly in the middle and upper classes, in the Victorian and the Edwardian period, ladies in particular were learning to paint and learning to express their interest in nature through doing detailed drawings and paintings. A wonderful example of this is the very popular and famous, in the UK at least, Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady, where Edith Holden would write down all of the things that she found interesting in nature. She kept kind of a journal and nature notes, and she also wrote down in here all of the poetry that kind of reflected the things that she was interested in and the seasons at the time. And all of this was done alongside these incredible watercolour paintings of species that she was learning. She wrote down their Latin names, so she was learning this as she went along. And this, for me, was my personal inspiration to get started with nature journaling. This method of using arts to further your own learning in the sphere of natural history is exactly what I wanted to do when I first started nature journaling back in 2016. So I'd say this book has meant ever so much to me and is a prime example of what I consider nature journaling to be. Beatrix Potter, of course, is also an important nature artist and writer. And before she went into her characters, which is known best for, she was producing these incredible illustrations for various scientific organisations. And before even that, we can see that she was, as a child, keeping something that I would call a nature journal. Now, at a similar time to Beatrix Potter and Edith Holden, we also had Flora Thompson, who's not so well known as a nature diarist. This is one of the only volumes that's around. This is the full Peveril Papers. Yeah, and it was pretty much self-published in the early 2000s by an enthusiast. Flora Thompson was best known for her Lark Rise to Candleford, which is a wonderful look into the lives of a small rural community at the turn of the century in the 1900s. But the Peveril Papers are a wonderful written nature journal where she wrote for a periodical called the Catholic Fireside, and it was essentially nature notes that she wrote monthly, and she would write some of the observations that she saw and some sort of stories and folklore around those, and also some interesting scientific notes that she'd kind of picked up and read about herself. So it's a really interesting, very early written form of nature journal or nature writing. And I think the last one that I want to mention before we get into the published literature that starts calling itself nature journaling is this one by Eileen Soper. So this one's called Wild Favours. And Eileen was an incredible naturalist and artist. She was interesting. She was a bit of a recluse, and she definitely preferred animals to people. And she kind of was living in this house and was recording all of the animals that were in her garden. So badgers, foxes, she would hand feed the birds and draw and paint everything. And she was a pretty good illustrator. You know, she had a career as an illustrator as well. She wrote a few of these books, Wild Favours and Wild Encounters, and they're both very beautiful. So that's kind of a very brief history of nature journaling before the name was coined for it. If you'd like to see more of this kind of thing, or you have any other books from these sort of earlier periods that you'd like to recommend to me, you can just sort of write that into the comments and I'll see if I can come up with a history or review of some of these other earlier books. But for now then, let's take a little look at when the words nature journal started to appear in the published literature. Let's start with this one. So this is Keeping a Nature Journal by Claire Walker Leslie, and this is the third edition of this one. So this is a kind of recent update of a much earlier edition. So she started, I think it was 2000, the first one came out, and this one was published just a couple of years ago. So let's take a little look. I mean, Claire Walker Leslie's work is beautiful, and if you haven't seen it already, you know, go and find that, particularly this one, but she has done others as well that are also beautiful to look at, and very inspiring, particularly if you're just starting out with nature journaling. So let's take a little look at what Claire Walker Leslie defines a nature journal to be. So the definition in this one is here on page 3. Nature journaling is your path into the exploration of the natural world around you and into your personal connection with it. How you use your journal is entirely up to you. And then she goes on from there to sort of talk about what kind of nature journaling approach you can have. If you're a teacher, a naturalist, an artist, a scientist, or someone who finds nature a source for healing, meditation and connection. And likewise, this resonates with me, this particular definition. I really, really do like this one. Going on a little further then, a little bit more recent, we have this one. This is The Law's Guide to Nature Journaling and Drawing by John Muir-Laws. And this one gets into a crazy, crazy amount of detail about all these different techniques, and it is a wonderful sketching guide, a guide to everything you really want to know about keeping this kind of style of nature journal. Now, what I find interesting about this book is that in here, John Muir-Laws doesn't actually define nature journaling anywhere specifically in here. On page 2, he goes right away to why keep a nature journal, without first saying what he considers a nature journal to be. And it's a very well written, lovely little piece here about how if you really love something and you express it through creativity, it can It can help you to become a better steward for nature. It can help you to fall in love with life again. And it's very well written. One thing that John Muir-Laws does very well is engage children and also engage people with the scientific method. So his approach is very much towards the scientific side. And he writes here, keeping a nature journal is a way to rediscover the thrill of science. Observing and journaling will slow you down and make you stop, sit down, look, and look again. How often do we take the time to be still, quiet, and attentive? Engaging in this process helps you to organise your thoughts, piece together answers, and ask richer questions. And if you know John Muir-Laws and his approach, this questioning thing is really important to what he does. He's interested in stimulating curiosity in your mind and helping people to connect in to science through citizen science and nature journaling projects. So because there's no clear definition in the book, I've gone to John Muir-Laws' website and the Wild Wonder Foundation website to take a look at what they define nature journaling to be there. So having a look at this website, he says, nature journaling is collecting and organising your observations, questions, connections, and explanations on the pages of a notebook using words, pictures, and numbers. You do not need to be an artist or a naturalist to begin. These skills can be learned by anyone, and you can develop them with deliberate practice. The system is creative, rigorous, and playful, easy to begin and learn, and will grow and mature over a lifetime. So that's kind of the definition that is given on here. And the question that is being asked there is, what is nature journaling? The last one that I want to cover is from this book by my friend Roseanne Hanson, Nature Journaling for a Wild Life. I particularly like this one because of the way that Roseanne chooses to define what nature journaling is, because it's a difficult question. She's actually put it into 3 different levels. So she's put at the highest level, it is deepening one's understanding of nature through observation and recording, which is quite a nice overarching definition. Then she's put at an intermediate level, it's a way of regularising our appreciation for nature, as well as building support for the conservation of nature, which I quite like that as well. It's sort of bringing in a little bit of how we can use nature journaling to then make a difference. And then on the last one, she's put at its most intimate level, a process of education and expansion that enhances our own knowledge and boosts our memory, self-confidence and well-being. I particularly like this one because it actually, it acknowledges the importance of well-being and personal connection in a way that Claire Walker-Leslie also did with her one. So based on all of these, I wanted to then go ahead and make my own definition of what a nature journal is. For years on my website, I'd been using nature journaling is the act of keeping a journal that has a strong but not necessarily exclusive focus on nature. And based on all of the research I did, producing this video, the blog, I decided to revise this definition this year. And so for the question, what is nature journaling being the process and not the object that you end up with, after a lot of thinking, I came up with the following definition. Nature journaling is the act of creatively recording your relationship with nature. And I like this because it doesn't say you have to go down any particular route. You don't have to be too scientific. You don't have to be too artistic. It is simply using some sort of creativity to express your own relationship with nature. So there's 2 points here. Creativity being the first. I think creativity is important in nature journaling. I think that's what distinguishes it from keeping a scientific record, like a pure scientific record. There is either some sort of embellishment in the writing or the use of images, art, photography, anything else to kind of make a little bit of a creative expression of that potentially very dry and scientific approach. The second part is your relationship with nature, and I think this is the most important part because this is where all of that wonderful well-being can come in, where you can take it in a direction that improves your own life, but also it instills that sense of care in us, and that's where the stewardship comes from, because you know what's there and you care for it, you want to do something about it. So that's what is nature journaling. What is this process of creating something that we can call a nature journal? So Then that begs the question, well, what is the nature journal then? If nature journaling is the process of creating a nature journal, what is a nature journal? What is this thing you are creating? Now, I like to define this in a way that doesn't require the nature journal to be any particular type of object. And I'll get to why that is in a minute. So you'll see now on your screen that I've put this little triangle over here, that triangle right there. This is how I like to define what a nature journal is. So on the top of the triangle, we've got the artist's sketchbook. So this is a traditional sketchbook kept by an artist to improve their art skill with a focus on nature in some way. That's right up that top corner there. Down in this corner here, we've got the writer's journal. So this is kind of your typical diary of some description where a person is using words in some way to express something. In this case, some kind of aspect of their relationship to nature. And then finally, down over on this very bottom corner on this side, we've got the naturalist's log. And this is the more scientific, whether you're a professional scientist or an amateur naturalist. This is a scientific way of keeping a record of what you're seeing. So this is very much using kind of numbers and facts, and your drier and more rigorous information. That this is the kind of thing perhaps you're wanting to learn. And this is the kind of thing, this is where a birders list would fit in, you know, down over here. It's also anything where you're trying to improve your knowledge of a species, perhaps its behaviours, the way it grows, where you can find it, anything like that, where you are particularly trying to improve your understanding and knowledge as a naturalist. That goes down over there. Now, the nature journal itself can sit anywhere within that triangle. So it might be up here a little bit towards the top if it's more of an art sketchbook. It may be somewhere down towards this side where if it's more of a writer's journal, or if it's a birder's log or something like that, it could be over on this side. So let's look at this in the context of some of my own work. Now, my big battle is to always try to be as close as possible to the middle of the triangle. I would like to be able to include all of these aspects in my work in some way. But within individual journals, sometimes the emphasis is changing one way or the other. So let's take a little look first at this one, which is my journal for 2019 to 2021. This one contains an awful lot of writing and sketches. It's very pretty. It leans more towards an artist's representation of nature than perhaps some of these other areas. It doesn't really include much of a record of my learning or of particular species in any kind of detail. So for this one, I'm just popping it over kind of towards this side of the triangle here. Let's now take a little look at this one. This is the journal that I was producing here in 2022. If you want to see the creation of this, that's what all of the earlier videos in my channel were all about. Now this one's a little bit more on the art side. There's a lot less writing in here, but there is a little more of an effort to be looking at different types of birds, looking at their behaviours. So I kind of put it up on the artist sketchbook side, but a little bit over towards the naturalist log. I was also keeping a record of the weather in here, and that was quite an important part of what I was doing, together with things like my mood as well. So that's kind of the more personal reflection side. Now this is one of my outdoor books. When I'm outdoors, I do an awful lot of writing, and occasionally also more now actually doing some sketching as well. So for all of my outdoor books, I'm always trying to get as close to the middle of this triangle as possible and include all aspects of nature journaling while I'm outside doing that activity, kind of, you know, in situ, in the site of what I'm trying to record. And the last one that I want to show you is this one. This is my perpetual nature journal. This is going to be the next video on this channel. I'm going to be doing a sketchbook tour of the last 4 years in this journal, so that's something nice to look forward to. But for now, the intention of this book really is to learn plant species. That's why I set this journal up. So it's very much on the naturalist and art sketchbook side. There's not an awful lot of writing in here. I tried to kind of put a few notes about something that's interesting about each of the plants that I've seen, but it's not, writing is not the main intention of this book. Now, a quick little note then about this one. I started to wonder quite a lot, really, about whether the Nature Journal was this, or whether the Nature Journal was the videos I made documenting the creation of this and showing you all the places that I went to when I was creating this book. Which one of these is the Nature Journal? I think that because we live in such a digital age now, because there's so many different methods and ways to use different techniques to create something that could be called nature journaling, which in my view, if it sits somewhere in this triangle, it can be considered a nature journal. Is that video series a nature journal? What if someone's keeping a blog? There's no physical book there. What if your nature journal is your Instagram grid? It asks some interesting questions, because a lot of people would say that a nature journal is a book and it has to be a book. But I think that now we're moving into a world in which in our minds digital objects or digital things are just as real and worthy as physical things. So when defining a nature journal, I think excluding the word book anywhere or physical journal is a necessary thing. Also, there's ways to keep a nature journal that don't require you to draw at all, or not requiring you to write if you don't like writing. You may rely on photography, scrapbooking, collage, collecting materials. Your nature journal may be labelled keepsakes. I think that one of the most important things when defining anything, not just nature journaling, is making a definition that's as inclusive as possible of all of the things that can fall into a category or a definition. Otherwise, you get into all sorts of trouble when something comes along that does not fit into your very rigid little box of what X is. And so it's really important to me to avoid this trap when doing my own definition of what a nature journal is. Now, there's loads of ways that you can join the discussion, and I'd love to hear your own definition of what a nature journal is or what nature journaling is for you. You can write that in the comments. There's also been a really wonderful discussion in the Nature Journaling Circle. And if you haven't heard of the Nature Journaling Circle, this is my online membership where I teach live classes. We have a social hour on Zoom. And it's also where all of my pre-recorded courses can be found and watched on demand, along with the library of all past tutorials. So you can find that at naturejournalingcircle.com. It's a lovely place to be if you want to learn nature journaling with me and with a wonderful community of really lovely people. Now, nature journaling just attracts the nicest people. And if you want to have friends from all around the world who are doing this practice with me, online in a community, come and find us at naturejournalingcircle.com. So thank you so much for watching the video. Do drop your own definitions of what you think nature journaling is down below, but let's not get critical of each other's definitions too much. It's personal, and for many people their nature journal and the way they do it is close to their heart. So let's be inclusive, let's open up the discussion, and there's loads of resources in the description box below. If you're new here and you want to find out about how I started nature journaling and why I love it so much, you want to watch that video right there. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.